What's up, everyone? It is about 4 a.m. here in California on June 22nd, and it's a time that I take to clear my thoughts. I wake up in the middle of the night and I started reading articles on Celsius. This is a story that hit the news maybe 5-6 days ago, where they halted withdrawals or exchanges of crypto on their platform due to a potential liquidity crunch. But the article I read has me making this video right now because it is a very frustrating thing to see, which is that people who took out loans on Celsius received margin calls and they were unable to take any action on it, putting themselves in a forced liquidation situation. Now, we all know the first mantra of crypto is not your keys, not your crypto. And that's obviously clear with what's happening here with Celsius, where nobody can access their funds. Now, in terms of why Celsius is having liquidity issues, we all know the crypto markets have imploded lately. We don't know the real behind the scenes reason. There's speculation that they were involved in the Terra collapse, but then people are claiming they were able to get out of that relatively unscathed. There is speculation that when ST Ether lost its peg to Ether, that there were additional liquidity issues. Quite honestly, as a consumer or user of the Celsius platform, the reason why at the moment is not so relevant, except in the case that Celsius really is not going to be able to recover. And in a crypto bear market that appears to only be getting worse, the risk of that, I think, grows with each passing day that they do not unlock the ability to withdraw. So before I get into some high-level advice, I do want to caution against attempting to cover your margin call, because there's a risk that any more funds you put into Celsius, potentially you'll never be able to get back out. And that is a catch-22 lose-lose scenario. So the article I read talked about how someone was forced liquidated out of their assets, and I've seen multiple videos and read multiple articles on the topic at the moment. And it's very interesting because all of Celsius loans appear to have been over-collateralized, meaning that there were multiples of value in assets that were used as collateral versus the loan. And that's not the way that typical loans work. And the reason for that is it provides a safety net. So I think typically what I've seen is 3 to 4 times collateral, meaning if you want to borrow $1,000 from Celsius, you need to put up $4,000 worth of crypto as collateral. You would think that would be safe in normal circumstances, but the problem with crypto is that crypto is highly volatile, and bull to bear markets have shown in general an order of magnitude scale between the highs and the lows. And this gets to a point I want to make, which is that taking out a loan on a highly volatile asset is a risk-on decision that for a consumer really becomes lose-lose. Because if the value of the crypto goes up, your assets are still tied up. You can't really do anything about it. There is a mechanism where they claim you can withdraw excess funds, but you're really beholden to them and their decision-making on that. However, in the inverse case, if the collateral goes down and you're forced into a margin call, you don't have any option other than to sell in this case, because they've blocked withdrawals and deposits. And so I've got some high-level thoughts on this that I know a lot of people in the moment are not going to want to hear, but if you've seen the other videos on my channel, you'll know that I've been there, and this is coming from a place of tough lessons learned through experience. Fundamentally, I think people need to ask themselves, what's the reason for doing this to begin with? Loans inherently are not a bad idea, but loans against highly volatile assets are a risk-on decision that should not be taken lightly. It's not the same thing as getting a car loan or a house loan where the value of the assets is much more stable. And so I think people inherently do it because of a fear of missing out, which we touched on in our last video. But with 4 times collateral available, if a bear market ends up being an order of magnitude less than the highs, you're very likely to run into a scenario where your collateral is no longer sufficient. And I think, unfortunately, we're just starting to see the beginnings of that. If we really continue to march into full bear market territory here, it's only going to get worse for them. The situation is already bad enough that people are talking about using online services to file small claims lawsuits against the company in hopes of jumping the line legally ahead of creditors. And in fact, if you're in a situation where you're impacted by this as a consumer, that's not a bad idea if it actually works, because typically the retail investor is the last one to get paid out. And I'm all for consumer advocacy and putting the power back in the hands of the people who are directly impacted by things like this. Now, at a high level, this situation is really nothing new. And in fact, as I said in my last video, I'm heavily invested in biotech, and biotech has experienced a very severe rout. Tech in general has experienced a very severe rout. I've got a lot of friends who have experienced margin calls through equities. This is something I've learned in the past, and it's something that is directly applicable here. Bear markets have a way of feeding themselves. What typically happens in bull markets is people over leverage, whether it's with margin or derivatives like calls. And once you enter bear market territory and those derivatives are no longer paying off, people get hit with the margin calls, they're forced to liquidate, and the situation only gets worse all the way up until the leverage is completely removed from the system. And so this gets into the 2 key elements that we mentioned for long-term success on the last video, which is persistence and resiliency. It's okay to believe in a highly speculative, highly volatile asset all the way up to 100% if you are convicted. The problem with going to 101% or higher in the form of leverage, whether it's buying call options, taking on margin, or in this case, taking out a loan, which doesn't kind of trigger that it's leverage in a natural sense, but when it's a loan against a highly speculative asset, and the only reason you're holding it is because you believe it's going to continue to go up, it's a form of leverage against a highly volatile asset that very much could go against you. When you take on that margin, you're now beholden to another party with an obligation that's pegged to a dollar value that you now need to repay. And once that happens, you're no longer in direct control of your own destiny. And so being persistent and being resilient is not about making the most profit on every short-term play. It's about being able to withstand the blows that get sent your way. And the only way you can do that is if you are in complete control. Taking chances by flipping a coin to maximize any single short-term return, if you know that you're taking on risk that could destroy you, is a long-term recipe for disaster. When your crypto can be forcibly liquidated, you're at the whim of the market, and the market can be unrelentingly bearish at times. One reason that people over-leverage is fear that this is the opportunity that they need to take advantage of because they don't know when the next one will come in the future. But the reality is there will always be that next opportunity. You don't need to take advantage of everyone to its maximum potential if it puts your own financial security at risk. So my advice in a situation like this, because I do keep a majority of my non-essential assets tied up in highly speculative long-term investments that I believe are going to be extremely successful over the long term, but that carry a lot of risk and volatility in the short term, is that you don't need to put anything beyond what is funny money into these type of situations. So if you needed a loan and you had crypto, just sell the crypto to get the money that you need and keep the rest of the crypto invested in crypto. You don't need to take out a loan against crypto to leverage your crypto. It's already highly volatile. It's already going to go up very, very high in the bull markets and go down very, very low in the bear markets. And so you don't need to leverage a highly volatile asset. It's just creating more volatility when you do that. And then in a situation like that, to recoup the crypto that you gave up to get the cash that you needed, you could take whatever the loan repayment amount would have been, and you can pay that back to yourself by accumulating crypto going forward. And if you're in a bear market, you'll actually be adding more with each incremental purchase. So your money will go further. That's a way that you really eliminate the risk to yourself and your portfolio, and you still continue to put yourself in a good position long term. All right, that's all I've got for this. It's more about financial education on the whole than Celsius in particular, but this Celsius situation is incredibly frustrating because the platforms aren't playing by the rules that they laid out in the beginning, and it's putting people in a tough spot. So if you're there, I absolutely feel for you. I'm very concerned about their solvency. I would be very reluctant to throw good money after bad in this situation. And I've seen people recommending just allowing Celsius to forcibly liquidate to cover the margin as necessary. I honestly kind of think that is not a bad move. That's all I've got. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you if you're in the situation. I feel for you, and I will be following and watching this story closely. I'll see you at the next one.